Sanji chedan soji
Chonamla chanchu bardu dani kansu Gi betsolangi rola peche sangi rupa shu
Sanji
Cholan
chedan
sogi
soji
chonamla
chonamla
chanchu
chanchu
bardu
badu
dani
dani
kansu
kansu
Kage
Dagi shushi
shishigi
gibi
betson
sonumji
rola
rolambe
peche
sanji
sangi rupa
rupara
shu
shu Sanji
Cholan
chedan
sogi
soji
chonamla
chonamla
chanchu
chanchu
bardu
badu
dani
dani
kansu
kansu
Kage
Dagi shushi
shishigi
gibi
betson
dagi
Rola
rolambe
benchi
Sanji
sangye
rupara
drupa
shu
sho.
Kanki tuzini zoni tawa tamji pambishi tambi chun tenzi kwadam kela changse lo.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning, happy campers. So should I repeat it also for the recording? I guess so. So you said that just letting Geshe know that today, this morning, in this morning session, you covered the topic of the need to rely upon a spiritual teacher and also the qualities of a spiritual teacher. 사람들이 콘솔 개워신인 텐츠 따기도와 쇼게 땡기 그바지 셰체 아니 개워신이 신기 세니 직세 니 단다 게슬라 페셰 그런 그래 손들이나 야메나데 게슬라 그런 게겐 텐탄도라 개워신인 텐탄도라 그냥 내년 돈에 계획이 안 나온 건설 앞에 하나 핑계레스.
That's all. Thank you. Deta sedang aja nomor sanji bigi. Shugula ya shug. Dinamita and tebachin shu. Tinani bitch sanga doji degi chula ya. Shug kautula tangman the tane kicheshu the cheshu di. Givishini pensul di chagiyores. Di chik donga tsami kita. Nangita nenga cheshu di. And lama pensul di. Chagados ratati chagados.
It's a good point because first off, we have entered the Buddha Dharma. Even more so, we have entered or we are engaging the Mahayana Dharma. And within that, we are entering sometimes the practice of the second mantra. And when you look at the things that are emphasized in those sets of teachings, the most important thing is to be a proper reliance upon a spiritual teacher. So as relying upon a spiritual teacher becomes a vital point in those teachings, we can see that it is common, the emphasis on relying upon a teacher is found in both the sutra system as well as the mantra system.
Terda di 균생 가르세 양아도 개체수로데 안dim지 가진 개체 뭐 차고요세 디 균생 디 예바이나 데니 신이 땜발이야 지 메버여 봐 아니 되니 여바지 용그러스 이 용그러스라.
And we need to look at the reasons for relying upon a spiritual teacher to ask ourselves, why is it important? Because if we find the reasons for relying upon a spiritual teacher, if we ascertain those reasons, we will then hold the spiritual teacher in high esteem. We'll be seeking, we'll be striving to do so.
대략 가인스나 당한테 대바 준비 취지야. 라돈도 상관도 되고 저거디 직니비가 세동 찍려야 아니 선전 탐지가 제도 더 산지 공방 조금 우주 주비고 아니 탑직 착으로 왔어. 내려연 주온디기 먼저 다치 샘께다 그게 지 아니 또만이 또 싫어서 속었다 말자로 왔다 디게 아니 땡샤게티 산지 손샤게티 전럽다 마소나 니보다 마소나 먼저 수수 샘려야 죽 마투바이나 가주스 그 밍 남랑 가주스 심바이네야 아니 산지야기 유견도 상고 말았다 디 전럽 디 귤스 용에라야 용시게 람다 마소나 티 아니 라마를 대비 대바티 톤 로 어디 차가도스
Particularly when we look at it from a Mahayana perspective, the perspective of the second mantra, where we have the ability to attain the supreme attainment, the state of Buddhahood in one lifetime, in a short lifetime at this time of degeneration, we have the ability to do that. We have the ability to employ the methods for attaining the state of Buddha. The basis for that is to develop bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, to develop wisdom that realizes emptiness. So these two act as a foundation for developing the method for attaining the state of a Buddha. So we have the potential for doing that. We have the ability to develop the method. We have the potential to do that. But the ability to do that is also facilitated through the spiritual teacher, in a sense that we might become learned in what needs to be done in order to attain the state of enlightenment. We might know the terminology, how to use the right jargon. It does not mean to say then that the ability to do so, the potential to do so is activated. So that the potential to do so is activated through relying upon a spiritual teacher, in a sense that, first of all, through having faith in the spiritual teacher.
내가 드리러 차고랬어. 디슈슈지기 상당고에 니수 차고 말했어. 심지어 탐지기 지도 라면 조선 그 공부 산지 공부 원래 샘띵이 산지 공부 텐딩 예치니 나중에 주요 봐나 결론 디토네 다 인증이 그러고 그랬어. 진짜 기침을 차야지 디레샤스라.
So it is only through this proper reliance upon a teacher that these other elements come to be. In that, particularly when we look at the way that we practice the Dhamma, so we have different objectives. We could have different objectives in doing so. Like, for example, you might put the Dhamma into practice, practicing meditation, but still your goal would be to make this lifetime more comfortable, to make them more pleasant. So you might be thinking that I want to prevent a sense of anxiety arising in my mind. I want to make sure that my mind is made happier and more relaxed in this lifetime. And for that sake, in order to find some comfort, I'm going to practice some Buddhist meditation. So you might do that, but still, it doesn't really fulfill the potential. It doesn't activate the methods for attaining the state of Buddhahood. So in order to do that, we need to, first of all, have this intention to attain the state of complete Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And when we develop this intention to attain the state of Buddhahood, complete Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings, and for that end, we're going to engage the path. This path is coming through a reliance upon the spiritual teacher.
차고되네 당한지 라마리아 대바용이야디 그러 대바디 란신기 랭기기 아니 대바 당만 슈점부지 용야 백하고로 왔어 가실이야지 개왕 함이기 바차급도기 센델이야지 수수기 레기 라마데 체바다 아니 지 아니 대바요 메바티지 리카실 용 시거마도 지 나다 나더라야 대바당나 장진이 아니 지 야고 시마도나 행기기 대바드 카고로 왔어.
So for that end, faith is important. And yet when we look at the development of faith, it is hard to think that faith, this natural and spontaneous sense of faith, will arise in a mind stream just by meeting a spiritual teacher. For most of us, it will not happen. It is possible that some people, having accumulated imprints in their past lifetimes in relying upon spiritual teachers, will encounter a spiritual teacher, a lama, in this lifetime, and this spontaneous faith will immediately spring in their mind. But for most of us, it's not going to happen. Geshe said that for him, it did not happen.
대다 딘자다 오나다 대바 컨트스 장고레스. 대바 장고레스. 라말리에 대바 장고레스. 라므르리 지금 동안 쇼 참아물이야. 대바 장고레스. 에 계시무 쇼송이었어. 마장바 안 대바 용면 대바 장고레스. 대바 컨트스 장고레스 라운디. 여도지 장 송코라 나마야. 세빈 기니 연된송. 뛰는 나면 송무자. 연된 소나 우주주. 뛰는 소나 우주무주스. 스타 쳬부터 엠비타고 코란 디송요레스.
And as it is difficult to expect that spontaneous faith and being able to have pure vision of the spiritual teacher will spontaneously arise in our mind, we need to train in the development of faith. So you might wonder, how do we train in the development of faith? The Lamrim tradition explains the way to train in faith. And it says that without deliberately training in the development of faith, faith will not arise. So you might wonder, how then do I take up the training in faith? Well, Vajradhara, in the writings of Buddha Vajradhara, it says that do not look for faults in the spiritual teacher, look at the qualities. If you look for the qualities, the spiritual attainments will arise. Whereas if you're looking for faults in the spiritual teacher, spiritual attainments will not arise.
데다 딘자 끼언 통구요레스라 먼저 끼언 통구 끼언 마송스 끼언 마타스 사람한테 끼언 여마르스 라우무다스 송 여마르스 주 여도지 상 송코나나라야 레벨이야 끼언 지 여마르스 김치 치코나 정마르스 수수기 비다지 아당아다와기 샘 착당 온 송까리야 아니 끼언 통구요레스 네 끼언 그 차는 성도 마땅하지 강 통바티 파지 배야 탑시치 아니 연딩 촌 아주 추 간다진 거이네야 추들이야 렉 비차지다 밀 비차지 아니 차니 여바티 추 탐절로 직바로지레스로 이제 렉 비촌이 같이 렉 비촌이 따투야기 돌아야 배준치바나 렉 비촌이 때문에 아니 소수 샘래야 렉차디 연구여러 왔어 다 니비촌의 때바나 소시샘 넘어라에 니비차 경기차도 거행 거랬어 우주 연구 말했어 디레도 왔어
So we do see faults in the spiritual teachers. But what Vajradhara said was, do not look at those faults. So faults will be seen. We do see faults in a spiritual teacher, but the point here is that we shouldn't then deliberately look at those faults. Turn your attention, Vajradhara said, to look at the good qualities. So Vajradhara did not say in his teachings that you will not see faults, that you will not, he didn't say don't see faults, because for people like us, and Geshe said at least for someone like him, whose mind is still affected by anger, attachment, and ignorance, we inevitably see faults in others because our mind is also controlled by such afflictive states of mind. So while we see faults in others, while we see faults in our spiritual teachers, the instruction that we get here is that do not look at those faults. In that sense, keep them hidden from your mind. In that sense, turn your mind to the positive aspects, so the positive things that you can see. And if you do that, then the good qualities in the spiritual teacher then will also arise in your mind. Whereas if your mind will be looking for faults, if it will be focusing on faults, at some point your mind will also be tainted by faults.
제 가서 다 담아वे 견 통과 페나 아니 점부 준비 온걸이야 견 통딩이 된 거랬어. 그래. 견 콘세 연된 콘딩기 아니 점부 준비 온거이 뭐이냐 견 통딩이 된지 장골 너무 성과 버첨볼이야 견 따딩이 견 제딩이 된지 이거였어. 그래. 아니 베나탄 장골 너무 성과 버첨이 C2 그게 야저루지다 캐르루지니 이 난다 캐르루지다 오늘 전에 남주 중입니다. 아니 배 간지 중다 기비 양재 숨바 직차고 그래서 공기 장관 너무 총과 같이 뭐 라마 땡지 아니 장관 너무 총과 같이 몰라야지 그 비기 가서 다지 바빠 좀 중인 지금 봐이나 디 메들이야 조티 파샤네 디 기치 수비 님이 전나진 거로 왔어 디 전나 수절이야 마키 버친 해위어레스 and namter namolya segiors kedurum namter nam tinti susu ngani lamale kyan taya kyang ton song taya pha shan rang lamale kyan jingin kyo shen yo ba na tusu da pa ani rodi che chin ani tus chin da lalam tam chi sama nya chin hegore tinti phewal ten da ani lami si to kyel so ba ani ten tel ya yaw doji chang komong on che to ya 딘디기 개발 연구하라서 그래.
And also looking at our teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, Buddha Munindra, even at the time when the Buddha was alive, there were people that saw faults in the Buddha, even though the Buddha was someone that has attained that state in which he was free from all faults and has developed all positive qualities. So even though he attained that state, still there were others that saw faults in him. And the same thing also applies to Lama Tsongkhapa. Also, there were those that have criticized Lama Tsongkhapa or that have seen faults in Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa had two foremost disciples, Kedrubje and Gyaltsabje. Kedrubje was considered to be this amazing scholar. He has developed those qualities of an amazing scholar, amazing accomplished person. And in his practice of relying upon a spiritual teacher, let alone not focusing on the faults of Lama Tsongkhapa, he also made sure that he does not mingle or does not become acquainted with other people that were seeing faults in Lama Tsongkhapa. Even to the point where, as it is stated in the life story of Kedrubje, that he was even avoiding those people even casting their shadow over Kedrubje. No, so let alone not hang up with him, also making sure that even their shadow does not touch him. So when you think about it, how Kedrubje was so devoted to relying upon a spiritual teacher and also keeping his samaya bonds, the pledges that he had, the pledges between a student and a teacher, then through that, Geshe feels that the state of Buddhahood, the state of Vajradhara is possible, is made possible.
Thing subject and then non-chile to some ching. Tell it haggard that the road into the young cigarette. Tell it haggard never gas yadabaris. He killed a long use satan Lama Kivishin, then Deva was draw. 딘디 갑둘라야 지 아니 저도 펜수 수수수 기타 라마 만다 만다 연사 지 배는 얘기 말한 그 저보디기 라마디기 따지 견주 통바이네야 저보들 싸우니 라고 말했어 가슴 그 기위신이 인자 딘지 잠선친 로그레스 펜수 지 개개인 뭐 하고는 수수 미디 견 통바이네 견 싸우니 저 말했어 저도 되게 인직투라야 포도를 삼지 싸우니 좀 딘지 잠선친 로그레스 아니 하던도 지 소소라야 아니 정chen 까분하고 쏠 기비겠지 아니 동하고 취득이지 마든 이마 딱과 채팅 난게 라마 기위 신이 됐다 산지 뭘 타고 이 아니 가든 삼 토니 아니 메시키는 좋은디 배샤디 띵사고 신고도 왔어 띵사고 신고 딘디 가든 때는 연구였어
And on a personal level, Geshe said that he spent 20, 30 odd years at Seda Monastery, right? So more than 20 years. And when you think of such a center for studying the Buddha Dharma and thinking about places in the world where people can engage in study, reflection, and meditation in order to illuminate the teachings of the Buddha, Geshe feels that it's hard to find a place that is better than such a monastic institution, better than Sera Monastery in terms of engaging with study, reflection, and meditation. So, of course, when you live in a place like that, when you have thousands of monks, you have many Dharma friends. And you know that they are relying upon their spiritual teachers, right? So they have different spiritual teachers. Each one of them is relying upon their spiritual teachers. And even if you see some faults in their spiritual teachers, you don't talk to your friends about those faults because if they are relying upon those teachers, what's the point in speaking of the faults of those spiritual teachers to them? So particularly when you think that it will make them disheartened, it will be something that will agitate the mind or will hurt the mind if you speak about the faults of this Lama or the other Lama, this spiritual teacher or another. You just don't do that. So you study the great philosophical systems, the 5 classics. You daily, those teachers daily teach teachings on sutra and tantra. And people train in seeing them as spiritual teachers and appreciate the kindness to the point in which they see them as kinder, is even kinder than the Buddha, more kind than Buddha themselves for providing students with that profound knowledge.
the get to money right feel money and sosu givishinile ti teaching buchini cheon digi gegin money by ne sosu get to le samta nyemushi ranshin chayu gres money chi 제발 해매봤어요. 먼저지 아니 가서다 지당게 먼저다 심전 탐하기 제와티 아니 작받아 되기도 왔어. 작습니다. 대한지 랑기 아니 아니 대기단 되어야 되겠지. 수술해야지 샘감을지 포와야나 람상 제월로 당도야지. 라라기 제와티 된지 말했어. 필해야지. 해매기 제와지. Gaging when you get to lay and maybe situation got it. Get to when you gagging lay and maybe indeed it comes to some chawandi, then the lame council but get to the layer pen, yasa jatam pen toying words.
So as a student that rely upon a spiritual teacher, as a disciple, you develop that high appreciation of your spiritual teacher. And as such, also when you have that deep appreciation of a spiritual teacher, when you see the qualities and this bond between a spiritual teacher and a disciple is created, then also the teacher is also drawing closer to the student. So this relationship works in both ways. So there's a sense of untainted love or loving care that is developed in that relationship from the student to the teacher, but just as well from the teacher to the student. So we speak about this term love, untainted love or loving concern. So we have that also in other relationships that we have in our life when we speak about love, but often this sense of love is mixed up with attachment, in the sense that we love that person because they make us happy. And when a situation arises when there's some hurt that we feel in our mind, then we do no longer love that person. So the type of relationship between a teacher and a student that is being created is without that sense of attachment. And as such, it is an untainted sense of loving care.
There is a kanji, dindigi sound down, the Gyushin said, the Katenchi Shush, Chidan Sanji, Tamkil Tuchi with the Democratic, and in moments of a Sanji, Zambalin Delia, Chugu Korioras. Jedina Tanganzu, and it Sonam Mandan Luangi, and Sanji was Jetu Mevas. Sanji was Zambalin de la Peva Yanaya, and was Jetu Mevas. And that Sanji Tsultrim Mevadi, Manzu Shi, Shimba Zamase, Yamyung Tova, Gula King, Tap Dingin di, Ranley, Lamde Ching, Lamagivishi, Tikona Remado, the Shen Sukan Yomarista, in the Sanji Lavach. Young women naturally a Sanji Lavachik, Tawabachik, Chagoris.
And then when we think about it, we can appreciate the kindness of the spiritual teacher in thinking that that's been so kind to me. And that when we think about the Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni, having attained the state of enlightenment, the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma for the sake of disciples whose mental continuum is to be tamed. So from that perspective, it was so kind. But still, on account of we not having enough merit, we are not able to meet the Buddha in person. We don't have, you can say that we don't have sufficient merit to meet the Buddha in person. But still, we meet a spiritual teacher that provides us with the knowledge or with the understanding of the teachings that the Buddha gave. And through that, we have the ability to develop those teachings as paths in our own mind stream. So we're able to do that. It depends upon a spiritual teacher. So since you can say that we haven't got enough merit to meet the Buddha in person, but we can still receive the teachings of the Buddha and use them in order to develop paths, spiritual paths in our mind stream. From that perspective, you can appreciate the kindness of the spiritual teacher as being even more kind to you than the Buddha himself.
Pigita Nyomchung and Namjunding the Chikuma sort of floating in Bina, any gigging in Bina D, any shoes similar to Mashawachi, any bear any Yonda Getachim with Nijivan, that is so 2 year the church year the Dutch Nimu Kama sort of Mezenalaya, touching me some other and share Ragumados that the Lama Chimbu Shuji Bina. Ani Nimatagba, and in Donga Gishon Kandaji by the T, Geshe Tsultrim, Tima, and Koko the Ragmados, Nazola. The Koko Yosati Karsana, Suzu Kanyam Lanyam to the young Indi, Gavishin Indi, Nimatagba, and in Nanzuchet, and Angaran Gagin Rojin by and Yamatagba, a Katu Chadai, Susula Tutsu Yobana, Katu Chadai, Charchocho, Kartina, Trichocho, Tin Lobke Rangishiba. But Dindiji was a daily cutting chage. One is some daily cutting yomars. Nangazuka Kolaya, Disu cutting the Samshimatuachi, and Nimatawa Kanyan Lanyam Rodedi, and it came Tong, and it came Chan Sound and Tongjon Chin Rodevana. That Dini and Sanji on the Sadi, and Lama Givishin Kuni Yon Sadi, Zawin in the Messiwachas. Non truth Samalo. And Yanga Samalo didn't have those from Ming Chambu and Shuji Chondri Che Mutu Sajilaya, Telo Kieti, Pinures, Coco Minures, and the Javar Muchito. Onsta pe and watching the chick Jebana, most Pigilaya, Chick Chawan Shuzarana, the Shura, the Tia Ragmaros. The Tindila and Telo Kieti Minures. The Kanyam Lanyam Nima, that was Susit, Kali Jabding, Telo Kieta, Yanga Picture, Tindi Kalia, that's substitute waters. Trasal that huge substitutes.
So in general, when we look at our attitude towards relying upon a spiritual teacher, we are drawn towards those lamas that have those big names, right? So this is what we're looking for. We're looking for someone that is really famous, someone that have like this really great name. But when you think about it, it's quite difficult for us to encounter those that are kind of have that big name. We have around us those lamas which are more humble. Just you can say those simple teachers. We don't normally pay heed to them. We don't pay much attention to them. It is so rare to meet those who have that big name or big reputation, but those who are more humble, that to us appear to be kind of more simple. We can encounter them more frequently. We can study with them daily. We can take up whatever questions and doubts we have. We can take them up with those teachers. Like, for example, Geshe said that with his spiritual teacher, his root teacher, whenever he needed, every day, he was able to go and see his teacher to ask whatever questions and doubts he could ask his teacher daily. And also through that daily, he got points for developing his mind, for expanding his mind. So with those teachers that you see daily, there's, you can say, a greater danger that at times you see faults in those teachers, and then you start to criticize those teachers because you see faults in them. You start to look down on them, and that becomes very dangerous. It is impossible to generate those paths that lead to the state of Buddhahood if you make such mistakes, if you fall prey to those dangerous points of criticizing your own spiritual teachers, those that you study with regularly. So think about, for example, meeting someone that has such a great name, great reputation, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So it is so difficult to see His Holiness for more than just a few minutes. You can say you might get that opportunity once or maybe twice a year. You know, there is that blessing that His Holiness gives, but it's not that actually we have the opportunity to sit at the foot of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to receive daily teachings from His Holiness, to ask our questions and to eliminate the doubts that we have. We don't have the opportunity to do that, and therefore it is also likely that the opportunity for developing a perverse sense of faith will not arise, or to turn back upon the faith that we have in His Holiness the Dalai Lama is likely not to happen, because the opportunity for that to happen is really rare. We don't see His Holiness that much. There's a greater danger with the teachers that we meet regularly. Right? So this is kind of something that we do need to take into consideration. We do need to be careful with a regular reliance upon a spiritual teacher, not to pay heed to faults that we might see in that spiritual teacher, not to criticize them, not to belittle them, and so forth, because if we do so, then we undermine our own path to Buddhahood.
Series of chapter cousin the Lama Tenso called the Shego Islam, Tatana Shig, the Ringi Lama Tenso called the Shego is someone Ranshin, Naran Kigin, changing it. Any Kigin, the touch Lomon Relaya, Tuzuki, if you get seminar, shoot some shoots, they take it. And Chilong, it's how it's Ranshin is serious. So shag the
So you might look at Geshe's face or his demeanor today, and he seems to be quite serious when he's speaking about the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher. And the reason is that when Chögyala asked Geshe to speak about relying upon a spiritual teacher, Geshe woke up this morning and of course, when you speak about a spiritual teacher, you also remember your own teacher. So Geshe was thinking this morning about his teacher. Then many years that he spent with his teachers, so having that in mind and also going out into this hot day, Geshe says that it seems that his demeanor is quite serious today.
어디에 디자 베네다 나도진 베나야다 라마기 신이래 때니 용이 까들 때니 다지 난초때 지 몬초투바 로 다지 난초래야 샘띵이 아니지 동아가 추티들이야 샘띵이 대바지 투야디 소 게르무스랑 까디니스
Having relied upon his spiritual teacher, upon Lama's spiritual teachers, and having trained in relying upon them, Geshe says that he have had a chance to develop some understanding of the introduction to the teachings of the Buddha, to develop faith in the teachings of sutra and mantra. This is all due to the kindness of her spiritual teacher.
아니 손포도 저기 엔지 가와 가른 제바 있느냐 아니 지금 워터 토야디 게롬치 까지 냐르치 차고레스 야 지금 소중원이 대바타는 지직 체체 아니 헤메 토니 아니 개개인이야 가신 체체다 아고 기두 그 간르 총와 있느냐 직수사도티 아니 소수 개개인 체체 또 지는 드론디 개개인 원이 임바이느냐 쇼지게 아니 토지 용대야지 참자려야지 아니 개개인 알아야 식수지 아니 갱코랑기 아니 분앙신도지 진 경고레스 라 어딘지 까질 된다 안 총여바등이 나랑다 용서로 디유스라.
So then Geshe said that on a personal level, looking at himself now, though it's not someone that has a great knowledge of the teachings of the Buddha, still, whatever thing he does know from the sutra system, the tantric system, the mantra system, from the teachings of the Buddha, in recognizing that when you look at the actual teachings of the Buddha, the tantras and such, it's really difficult to decipher what the Buddha said directly. So you rely upon the commentaries of the Indian masters, such as Nagarjuna and his spiritual children, and also of Tibetan masters like Lama Tsongkhapa, and including the 18 volumes of teachings that Lama Tsongkhapa gave. So all of those teachings were given to Geshe by his teacher. Due to the kindness of his teacher, Geshe said that he was able to develop some knowledge of those teachings that came from the Buddha, explained by the Indian masters, and likewise by Lama Tsongkhapa. And as Geshe said that he has trained in the development of faith and pure appearances of his teacher, to the point of view that Geshe holds his teacher with that sense of faith that is an untainted sense of faith. And through that, he established this bond, this connection between him and his teacher, which was based on love and care. His teacher regarded Geshe himself to be like his own child.
아니 주술진 거래서 따라 다 딘디기 라마 기위신이 피지 아니 숑 가봉아 동아 니가로 찬장 내 땡팅이 라마질이야 때마 두바이나 아니 내가 디싱 말했어 그러 아니 대번 비기 따지 대번 멤버리아 아니 송단직 아니 대번 전부 아니 도초고 송단직 아니 규 송단 도수직 통디게 직 배로가 소리지 요라스 이나야 디츠 콘득투야디 라마기위시닝기 맹알아 땡고레스 다디 콘직직투바나 근데 시니 아니 산지기 줄이야 아니 시니 대버터버 독메비 대버세디 용구였어요. 그래서 참아 용해야지 라마기위시니 피기다 첸덴질이야 첸덴 당한도 피기 난기 또비온데 통말했어 근데 텐산 로지 나티 송당게서 텐산 로지 바 example 나로라야 난치고는 칸치 슈 가도 그 닥슈 가도 데니 템비게 아니 지 라케 첸데 용이 야 땡샤와이나 페시케요 말스 소소 통솔이야 가리네 용초르데네 디기 캐란라야 동가 그치 참을로 야차 야다 뭐 어쩌 제토그레스 디디질 템바이나 아니 소소레 용된자 그레스 이마도 지 가야 미싱이질이야 아니 라마친 대바이나 아니 지버다 용데 기야기 소소리 용된 하와지 제야 코란라 메나 아니 소소리 용된 하와지 자야 카브로 왔어
So we take up those trainings, and those trainings become very deep. The teachings that Buddha gave become very deep. So without training, without studying those teachings and training, we're not going to be able to develop our mind. We're not going to be able to attain the state of enlightenment on the basis of developing our mind in this way. So then when we look at what we train it, so that the teachings of the Buddha are teachings on the Hinayana system, the Mahayana system, including the Tantric systems. And those teachings are available through the 5 great philosophical systems, the teachings on Sutra and Tantra. Without relying upon a spiritual teacher, we'll not come to know or to understand those teachings. And without them, we're not going to be able to develop those realizations, those attainments in our own mind stream. So to begin with, without relying upon a spiritual teacher, we might try to take up one of those systems, Hinayana, Mahayana, Tantra, and so forth. But when we try to make a way by ourselves, they might first of all appear to us to be different system, unrelated system. We need to know how to not only train in all those systems, but also how to combine them together. And that can be made available to us through relying upon a spiritual teacher. So when you do that, when you train under a spiritual teacher, then you develop faith that is born from knowledge, which also becomes irreversible faith. Now, one thing to also acknowledge is that with our current capacity, it's not that we can look into the mind of another person and directly see the qualities. It's not something that we can do. So then if you think, how then do I find someone that has the qualities of a spiritual teacher if I cannot really see the qualities of their own mind? Well, to begin with, Geshe said, let's take a practical approach. So at this point in time, we can make our own research. We can, for example, make a research, check out where is a place in the world that people can study the Dhamma very deeply, very extensively. Where in the world do people study the Dhamma in a kind of vast and extensive way? Do they get a graduation certificate out of the study programs? What kind of qualifications they obtain when they finish the study programs and so forth? So this is a practical advice, or this is a practical way that we can use in order to at least assess a person that we can, to begin with, train with or study with. Otherwise, if you don't do your own research and you just rely upon anyone that you meet, without checking that actually they have the qualities that you need, they have the knowledge that you need. If you rely upon someone that doesn't know much, that doesn't know anything, you could say, how will you develop your own knowledge and good qualities?
데리다 더조 소수 락렌 딸이야지. 그러 락렌 딸은 들어봐요. 아니 용화직 연구요리스. 그러 용화직 용회 줘야지. 근데 더지 나도지 봐나 라마 기위신이 망볼 때요래. 더지 참마기 샵도셔다. 담이 나도지 연구면도 그냥 나랑 개로 붙일래 양이 하나 컨섬 직고제 타말이야. And Shabshivais, but there, Gadet Trosum said, Ton, Gawa, Teva, Sem Troviton, Hilea, Yin Sen, conducted to Vinea, and again shall do Shiati, so you down the lambari, Chick Mixi Hilea, Migin, draw, Chick Tangandu Mimanche Legation, Benjur Soda, mean Soda, the Tindicilla, Migiati. 나도 미망제 쇼르로 인디 자원이 매베 소리지 딘지 톤다 양기 샵슈다 로숨 시지 나라는 게베 아니 인생 이거 지치는 이 샵슈바이스 이 젤이야 아니 나랑 서로와래야 아니 이 지금 동안 그 쇼 칸데 때바이나야 할린 타가다지 가리는 게 곧대우 소리지 당이 디 시에드는 야운동아 딘지 소화지 위해서 These sort of years.
So then you take something like that up and you put it into practice, and then you try to assess, you start to assess your situation based on the experience that you get that is based upon your practice. What kind of experience do you develop? So just to give you an example of that. So Geshe had many lamas, many virtuous friends. He's not going to mention the name of all of them, but his own root teacher, Geshe, as he said, he relied upon him for many years, and he had a chance to attend him in the last 3 or 4 years of his life when he became more sick and bedridden. So Geshe have nursed or attended his teacher in the last few years of his life, and he did that with, first of all, a great sense of joy, but also with faith. And the work of nursing or attending his spiritual teacher in the last few years of his life was something that he had to do day and night, right, without a break. So when you take up a certain job similar to that, often people are kind of concerned, or they're looking for either money or reputation or whatever. But Geshe said that when he looked at his attitude in attending his spiritual teacher at the last stage of his life, Geshe said that without any form of expectation to be reciprocated by attending to his teacher, not looking for money or reputation and so forth. He did it with this genuine sense of love and joy and faith in his spiritual teacher for 3 or 4 years, day and night. And then Geshe said that after the passing away of his teacher, the type of feeling that he got in his mind is that whatever teaching he studies or has studied, teachings on sutra and teachings on tantra, the understanding that he got of those teachings was made so much better or clearer. Geshe feels that, now of course he's not going to go into great details with respect to that, but he feels that being able to understand them better or more deeper is due to having relied in this way upon a spiritual teacher.
Ngati kolon tie mes yasi jata ma mes ro anji ta gen nga kaden chim shu kyang ba insa gen koran pi le ya chi ani kusu thangbo ani chi peja thik thu bi khaptu le ya an tyutsu khandra ji tang go chong na ya ngam so le ya tyutsu tang chi shela kyu re shuksa kyu re shuksha ya bu yo ma re 아니 지 gen코랑이 현대도 좋다 지 살마서 지디 쇼기 추도 숨발이야 나 마샹바 있는 게 아니 현대 세금도 배자 튀기는도 손지 쇼기 추도 숨발이야 차지 상진 아니 쇼기 신의 찬스로 쇼기 추도 숨발이야 상진 아니 현대도 살지 왔다 dinti college enchini ani manzule page tiwanza ani garden the touch so same ching ani gang shall shown be tene kibudos kibubedos ra thambu shebana ani gang samjala ya gang kana nganyoji la dos na ji kana si kiwing grace 직선 선수라 tadi me nganzu me sama me dijra das chigi kana yabu chagarla na gagra nga pe maso gawo chons himata nga khe go thama dile ya chi gen gombo zot sa jele ya ni sam na la ya nga trasa la do an pecha te gishi ro tabcha ta ta chi gishi mi jira or da ne de zong gi chi yabu chons son shu chen sang nga ani zao ni mundos ne nge gen ko se thama dile ya lossum shisajirin ya bi chavsan chavcheni chin ngara lagpe len chin chavshya ta ditanga mazan ya ushu chon san ngala gawa tius ande na tius
When you attend someone like that, you might be thinking that I'm doing that in order to attain a good result for myself, to make a good name for myself, to improve my practice and so forth. So Geshe had no such motive in attending his teacher, just it reflected upon the kindness of his teacher in giving him teachings for so many years. Particularly when Geshe's teacher was younger, his health was better, it was sound in body and health. Whatever time he spent with his students. So he used to wake up at 3 a.m. to make sure that he finishes his personal practices, his prayers, so to speak, his recitations, because when students come to see Geshe's teacher, even if he did not finish his prayers on time, he used to set them aside and make sure that he focuses on still giving teachings to the students that came for classes. And at that point in time, it's not that the conditions were really good at Sarah Monastery. So food was quite poor. Accommodation or the housing were quite poor. Facilities conditions were quite poor, but still his teacher was making sure in whatever way he can that whenever students came up, then he allocated the right time, enough time to give them teachings. It was so kind, and Geshe was so happy to be able to attend to his teacher at the last stage of his life. And his teacher one day stopped and kind of pressed his palm together and said that, really one day, because of that, your life will be happy. You'll have a good life. So obviously we want our teachers to say things like that to us. Now, all of us would be made happy if the teachers would say that one day if your life will be made good, will turn out well. So Geshe says I was kind of looking at what he managed to do in his life. So he studied for many years at Sarah Monastery. Then he sat through the Geshe exams. He graduated as a Geshe. So it's not that he considers that to be the greatest achievement of his life, like this is a great thing that I've attended in my life, so to speak, but being able to reciprocate the kindness of his teacher, to attend his teacher at the very end of his life and to repay some of the kindness, Geshe feels that this is the best thing, the most important thing that he managed so far to do in his life.
다 체온디게 아니 개개인 기체와들 때문에 작아졌어. 먼저 개인으로 뭐지다 그런 친구 말마다 아니 댄서스 들어와 이게 표준 난딩 기타 러닝 칸치시 댄서스 작아졌어. 댄서스는 피시 자와 치치글라라시 러닝 치기요레스. 다디 나노라야 깨다요레스. 세시 캔슬로 선세리스라디 깨다요레스. 아니 콩라야 게투다 깨다지페 망보레스라. 게투 동자 기기리 지난 답변은 저런서 셈메바이나 당가란 쪽이 라마 잡지 소버로 무치레 아니 자도로 무치찬 셈마고 코에지레 자도로 무치레 아니 단단 남제 타서 야오롱 치고 고모티 캠보 아니 총도로 시키는 줬다 군 상황은 로직 아니 공념으로 지레스 자도로 무시 총도로 무시 소보로 무시 군 상황은 같이 로트 찍바로 지레 군 상황은 가서 개인 게트리스 아니 깨닫지 못하냐를 그냥 담아게 아니더니 쉬시는 이거지 게 como 맞아 공 아니 군수 팀지 젠티기 우리 템벌에 펜도 쇼 치기요래 심전에 딘디 펜도 치고를 나로 마르데냐 니기 삼번남다 레테니 타마 갱기 투지 치슈디 나이비 천나서 나라는 예스로 갱코란에 치 대된 짜치슈 투조 아니 갱코란 마페고 니라고라 샤스 말레트에서
가르쳐서.
아
So this is the type of untainted attitude that is developed through this relationship. So Geshe not only had that untainted attitude in relation to his teacher, but also his teacher also had this untainted love and care for Geshe. So when you think of the setup, the monastic setup that Geshe comes from, where his teacher was living, Sera Monastery is one of the three great monastic seats. So you have Sera, that's Geshe's monastery, right? Sera, Drepung, and Ganden Monastery. These are the three great monasteries, and altogether they have more than 10,000 monks residing in those monasteries. And over the years, great masters have emerged from those monastic institutions. And Geshe's teacher, Khenso Losang Tsering, was considered to be one of those famous teachers that came out of those three great monastic seats. And Khenso Losang Tsering had also, he had thousands of students, obviously. He died at a very old age, so over the years he trained many students, and of his students we have some famous lamas that we might have heard of. So first of all, Kyabje Lama Sopa Rinpoche was also Khenso Losang Tsering's student, and also Jado Rinpoche, for those of you who heard of Jado Rinpoche, the current abbot of Namgyal Monastery, the monastery that is affiliated with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So Tromdog Rinpoche, the abbot of this monastery, was also a student of Khenso Losang Tsering. So all of them are, you can say that, for those who have had the names of those lamas, all of them are regarded as high lamas. They're also influential lamas. They have many students. They benefit the teachings. They benefit the students. They benefit many living beings with their activities. So all of them were students of Geshe's teacher, Khenso Losang Tsering. And yet Geshe says that at the end of his teacher's life, the one that he liked the most, so to speak, and Geshe said, it's okay to share it amongst you, was Geshe himself, in a sense that this is the kind of, speaking of untainted love or care. At the end of Geshe's teacher's life, when he thought of the few kind of important possessions that he still had in his care, sometimes he keeps a certain object, normally a statue, as the main reference for you for the development of faith. It is called a support for faith, a basis for faith. So Geshe's teacher had a Buddha statue given to him by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and at the end of his life, he's passed it on to Geshe. Rather than passing on to someone else, he passed it on to Geshe.
어딘데 나 간지 가는 속이 기위 신이야 아니 연된 때 봐이나 소소라 캡산 요레스 봐 견다 무척슨 소요 말다스 견때 봐이나 경라그레스 소요레스 디심토니 견 토나야 견 구촌 성도 마다치 연된 구촌 성당 저와이나 아니 소소라 캡산라고 그랬어 사또는 그랬어 아니 지난 간저 가서다 마주 라마리 라마 롱발에 요리 가시엔데나 가르삼데나 수수 라마리 되니야 소 띵안줄이야 아니 캡상 가리용 가르 고고요 라 아주 가르된 얘기요 어디 토비야게 삼로 땅고 디 약슈디 아니 경구촌이 삼로마다 연댕구촌이 삼로땅 계산도 토고레스 디 다추 공된도 디레샤스 디 툴샤로치스라.
So finally, Geshe wanted to sum it up in saying that with relying upon a spiritual teacher, we train it looking at the qualities of that spiritual teacher. Now, the advice that we get in those teachings is not saying you're not permitted to look at faults. It is not said that you're not allowed to see faults. The teachings that are given here are given a recommendation. It is profitable for us on a personal level to look at the good qualities of the spiritual teacher. It becomes disadvantageous to look for faults or to look at the faults of the spiritual teacher. It's not profitable for us to do it. It is stated like that because, first of all, we recognize that we do enjoy the freedom of choice. We live in a free country. We have the freedom to think and the freedom to say what we want. So here the instruction that is given is not saying that you're not allowed to see faults. The advice that is given is that think about what's going to be profitable for you, what's going to work for you in the best possible way. What's going to be profitable is to attend the mind to looking at the good qualities of the spiritual teacher. It's not going to be profitable. It's not going to be advantageous for us to look for faults in that person. So think about it. This is the attitude that we take up here. Nyododa lama sangye drugyane drowa chikya malupa te salago pasho. Rinpoche ma ke panan ke gyuchi ke panyam pa me pai gone gondo pe washo. Kowe shinkam pendan de wa malu juene chenre si wan tenzin gyatsoyi shape site partu thank you. Jan shin jan gun gyam tenzin kyom pe we kunzo do po tse chosu kowe le mon tu tu Pada sodruce condushate. Thank you. Dila chawan nantuaina.